Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining the 2023 Active Transportation Program workshop. We're going to give it just a couple more minutes to wait for a few more people to join. So I'll be back on in 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We are going to get started now. So thank you again for attending the 2023 Active Transportation Program workshop. And let's see. So unfortunately, I will not be sharing a inspirational active transportation story at this workshop, not because I didn't want to and not because I didn't have something, because I actually did, but we really have a lot of things that we have to cover today, and we have to get through everything. So I just didn't want to take any time away from getting through the workshop material. So, by the way, my name is Lori Waters. I am the program manager for the Active Transportation Program at the California Transportation Commission. And here for the commission, we also have Alika Changizi, also with the Active Transportation Program, and Justin Hall, who's with the commission, and he always helps us out on the workshops, and Beverly Newman-Burkhart will also be presenting some the workshop today. And then, as always, we have Caltrans active transportation staff that will be here for any questions or support as we need them. Okay, so before we get started, Alika will talk about how you can participate in today's workshop.
Okay, thank you, Lori. There we go. Sorry. Okay, thank you, Lori. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 2023 Active Transportation Program Central Workshop. Our workshops normally take place in different locations across the state. However, containment measures surrounding COVID-19 have required us to adjust to a webinar format. Please bear with us should we encounter any technical challenges. For participants joining us through GoToWebinar, please find the webinar panel located on the right-hand side of your screen. There you will find the audio, questions, and handouts tab. Under the audio tab, you have the choice to listen in via computer or telephone option. If you prefer computer audio, please select the appropriate box. If you prefer phone call option, select the corresponding box and dial the phone number, access code, and audio PIN as directed by the system. Please note that if the audio PIN is not entered, you will remain in listen-only mode and will be unable to speak should you have any questions or comments. As a reminder, each registered attendee is provided a unique link, phone number to access the webinar. These cannot be shared with other participants as they are registered to a specific attendee. We welcome comments and questions from attendees as part of each topic at this workshop. There will also be an opportunity for comments and questions at the end of this presentation. There are two options for participation to provide comments. You may click the hand icon to indicate you wish to make a comment. You will then be unmuted and called upon to make your comment. Please be sure to state your name and affiliation prior to voicing your remarks. Also, please use the raise hand feature as early into the topic as you can to give the system time to acknowledge you. You may also use the questions tab to submit a question or comment. Please type in the topic you are commenting on and your comment. Commission staff will read the comment on your behalf. Thank you again for joining us today, and we appreciate you sharing your time and your feedback with us.
Okay, thank you, Alika. Okay, so as I explained last time, I am very slow at hitting the buttons that I'm supposed to be hitting. So if you hear echoes, just give it a second for Alika to fix things for me. Okay, let's get started. Okay, this is, we've been having the slide in all of the workshops, just a reminder. So for the 2023 Active Transportation Program, we have 4 years of funding. We have 4 years of funding every 2 years. And we anticipate the same funding level as last cycle. As a lot of you probably know, the January budget came out, and The 500 million augmentation that we had thought we were getting last year is in the budget again, but it is part of a package of transportation funding that is still tied to negotiations on the high-speed rail. So we're kind of in the same situation that we have been for a while now, that we hopefully we'll have 500 million of ATP augmentation that we will talk about at some point, how to use it when those funds are available to us. Okay, so these are the goals for today. So we'll recap our last workshop, which was December 15th. And then we'll finalize some discussion items that we've talked about already. And we will bring up a couple new topics. And then only if we have time, we will get to our administrative changes that we want to make sure everyone knows about and minor language changes. And then at the end, we will cover any action items that came up. Okay, this is our workshops. I'm gonna kind of talk about the workshop schedule along with the overall program schedule. So we've done quite a few workshops already. Today is January 11th. We're on a central workshop. This is our guidelines. And then we will have another workshop on January 19th. So the January commission meeting is on January 28th. I think it's 26th. Oh, January 26th, 27th. So the draft guidelines will be presented at the commission meeting probably on January 26th. And those are the draft guidelines. It's an opportunity for the commissioners and the public or any stakeholders to make comments. And then the guidelines will be adopted at the March commission meeting. So we did not want to have any policy items outstanding before we present the draft guidelines, because we really were trying to avoid not having any policy items come up between the presentation of the draft guidelines and the adoption of the final guidelines. So that's why we're trying to get through all of the policy items today. And so the workshop next week will just be administrative changes and wording changes that are important that all of the stakeholders see. So there's nothing in there that would raise any concerns, but they are not any policy items that have come up. And then on February 8th, we will have a workshop on the application. And that's where we make sure that anything that has come up when the guidelines is actually in the application. And we can talk about things like if certain sections need word count changes, things like that. At this point, we can't make major overhauls to the application, but we can change wording and things like that. And then February 23rd, the workshop will be focused on the scoring rubrics. Okay, and these are the branch workshops that we have scheduled. And then this is the overall ATP schedule. So when we adopt the guidelines at the March 16th and 17th commission meeting, we'll also adopt the fund estimate, and there will be a presentation of the draft fund estimate at the January meeting too. The fund estimate shows how much funding we expect to have in the program and how it will be distributed. And at that March meeting, after we adopt the guidelines and the fund estimate, then we'll put out the call for projects. And the project applications will be due on June 15th. And that's the June 15th is an electronic date, not postmark date. And then the staff recommendations will be out towards the end of October for the statewide small urban and rural. The program for statewide small urban and rural components will be adopted at the December meeting, commission meeting, and then we will adopt the MPO selected projects at the June 2023 meeting, and then that will be basically the close of the 2023 program. Okay. So I'll stop for just a brief minute here to see if we have any questions or comments on schedule or anything before I go on.
Not seen any of that.
Thank you, Justin. Okay, so let's see who.
This section is.
Okay, this is, okay, Beverly's going to take over here for a couple slides.
Yes. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. So I am going to go over what we finalized at the last workshop on December 15th. Next slide, please. So the main item that we finalized at the last workshop was the language for the inclusion of projects in planning documents. This will be added to the public participation and planning section of large infrastructure and combination projects. And so the language that the group decided on reads as follows. It's on your screen in bold underline. So it's additionally for large infrastructure and large infrastructure / non-infrastructure combination projects. Applicants will be awarded points for the inclusion of the project in an adopted active transportation plan or similar plan. Eligible plans must have been developed through a comprehensive public engagement process. And so just as a reminder, this will just be for large project applications, and then we will not be including any sort of list of specific plans that your project must be in. And so when we discuss the application, we'll discuss exactly what this will look like in the application. But again, we want this to remain as flexible as possible for all of our applicants because we know there's lots of different types of plans out there that could meet these requirements. So at this time, we can see if anyone has any final questions or comments on this language. So I will hand it over to Justin to see if there are any.
Thank you, Beverly. Yes, we do have a couple written questions and comments that have been submitted during this time. The first comes from Colin Clark. They ask, will the application process be web-based online?
Yes, so it's all electronic applications, and applicants will be able to obtain and fill out their application and then submit it online. And we're not requiring hard copies this year, so the whole process will be electronic this year.
Thank you. The next written question comes from Rachel Marconi. They ask, does the active transportation plan or similar include Caltrans district active transportation plans?
I would say yes. That sounds like a similar plan. So what I'm imagining will be in the application is some sort of space where you can explain the plan that your project is in and kind of explain like what that plan is and how the project fits into the plan. So again, we're not specifying anything specific within our scoring rubrics or within the application or in the guidelines. Applicants will have a chance to justify the type of plan that they're using.
Thank you, Beverly. We have one more written question that we've received at this time. Comes from Colin Clark. They ask, how many points will be awarded for jurisdictions with an adopted policy resolution to prioritize safety over speed and throughput of vehicles?
I'm not entirely sure how to specifically answer how many points will be awarded for those applicants. I feel like, and Lori can chime in, I feel like that was a pretty specific question, but
Yeah.
I feel like those items can fit into various points within the application where they can talk about that, and discussing items like that definitely enhance your application. Lori, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I don't totally understand the question, so that person will need to come off mute and explain it better for us to answer it appropriately.
Colin Clark, if you would like to come off mute, you are free to do so. And yes.
Great, thanks. So in terms of Vision Zero adopted policies at the countywide level or at the local level, are there additional points awarded to jurisdictions that already have an adopted policy that specifically requires them to prioritize the safety of people traveling by modes that are GHG reducing?
No. So for this specific question where we're asking if it's in an adopted active transportation plan, we'll discuss it more within the application workshop, but I imagine it will be like an all or nothing, like yes, it's in a plan, or no, it's not. Could be different than that, but that's what I'm imagining it'll be like. So we won't be giving more points for any specific type of plan or any specific policies for this question. However, in terms of what you're saying, I think there are lots of places within the application where you can highlight that in your narrative. In large applications, in the transformative project section, we ask about policies that support transformative projects in your community. So you can definitely talk about it there. And there's just various points within the application where you can definitely highlight that. And the more information about things like that you provide, the richer your narrative on the application. Hopefully, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, Beverly. We have a couple more. The first comment received comes from Diana Meehan. They write, I believe in the last cycle there were Vision Zero points.
There were no Vision Zero points in the last cycle, unless Lori, correct me if I'm wrong. We certainly had plenty of applicants discuss their Vision Zero plans, and especially in the context of safety. And I would say that those applicants who did discuss that in the safety question did well in that question. I don't know, Lori, if you want to reply to that as well.
Yeah. No, we didn't have specific points on that. I mean, that the only thing I can think of is if we have a prompt in the application about Vision Zero, which I can't remember right now. But
yeah, it is possible that there is a prompt in there asking like that you can discuss it if you have it. I don't remember off the top of my head either.
So just so everyone knows, Beverly right now is talking about this specific language about projects and planning documents. We're trying to finalize this language for the guidelines.
Thanks, Lori.
Diana responded by saying thank you. It may have been in the scoring rubric. Received a written question from Lucy Cardenas, and then we'll follow up by, we have one attendee with her hand raised at this time. Lucy asks, do we need any specific items for the ATP site meeting?
Oh, for like your virtual site visit? If that's what you're asking about, you can reach out to Alika. There's nothing specific that you would need for that, but we do have some suggestions of things that you could include in your presentation.
Thank you. We have one attendee with their hand raised. We have Carl Anderson. Carl, you're free to unmute yourself and make your comment.
Hi there, Carl Anderson from MTC. I'll help clarify for Diana and Colin, who are both in jurisdictions in the Bay Area. We do in the Bay Area have a scoring element of our regional application that prioritizes applications with Vision Zero safety plans. So that's probably where some confusion's lying there. And then I'll just say, Beverly, thank you, and Lori, thank you. MTC supports this language.
Great, thank you so much, Carl. Thanks for clarifying that, because I didn't remember that from your application, but that's a good point. MPOs can have, they can get some different criteria approved through the commission for their own regional guidelines. So theirs might be slightly different than ours. Anything else, Justin?
Yes, Beverly, we did receive one more written question from Diana. She asks, is there a definition of comprehensive public engagement?
No, there isn't. So, well, there is. So I imagine in the application, you'll get a chance to discuss this a little bit and like within the context of this question. And in our scoring rubrics, we do talk about comprehensive public engagement and what that means within the context of the program. And within the context of the program, it's there's several different things that we talk about, but usually we're talking about like engagement that fits like the complexity and magnitude of the project. In this case, it would be like the plan. And we also, at least in terms of the program and the projects, we ask about, you know, making sure that you're engaging with key communities, especially disadvantaged communities. Yeah, I think and for this question within the application, there will be a chance to explain that a bit. Anything else, Justin?
Beverly, I do not see any other attendees looking to make public comment at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so great. It looks like we can finalize this language, and I guess we can move on to the next topic. Thanks, Malika. All right, so now we're going to jump into a few items that we've been discussing over the last few workshops that we haven't quite finalized with this group yet. So we're hoping to finalize them today, just in preparation for the commission meeting this month. So hopefully we can get through these. So next slide, please. So the first topic that we wanted to discuss is housing language. And so we have discussed this at, I think, 2 previous workshops, one of which included a presentation from the Department of Housing and Community Development on their pro-housing designation program. And so just as a reminder, the goal of adding this language is to kind of build on the housing language that we previously integrated into the application in recognition of the state's housing goals and the link between transportation, especially active transportation, and housing. And so we worked closely with HCD on this language, and we also have brought a few different iterations of this language to this group for feedback, and we've tried to incorporate your feedback here. The current language as it reads in the application, so sorry, again, this would be added to the transformative projects question. So this is a question in the large application only. And this question currently, again, asks about housing, it asks about land use policies, it asks about local policies and local transportation goals. So that's kind of already in this question in the application. So the language that we would be adding to the guidelines reads, in addition, applicants should address the potential for the project to support existing and planned housing, especially affordable housing, and how the project will advance local transportation and land use goals. Applicants are encouraged to apply for the California Department of Housing and Community Development's pro-housing designation program and to describe how local policies align with pro-housing criteria. If housing is not an issue for the community, the applicant should explain why it is not a concern. So again, we will not be requiring pro-housing designation this cycle. We're just going to be encouraging our applicants to look into it and apply for it in recognition of the fact that in future cycles, it could be something that we score on, but not for this cycle. And so we really want to get everyone prepared for that in case it does happen in the future. So we can now open this item up for any questions or comments or feedback. So I will hand it over to Justin.
Thank you, Beverly. Going to give it a minute, but I would like to take the opportunity, if we can, to read a question that came late into the last segment.
Sure.
They ask, is there a specific number of engagement touch points required for different size proposals?
No, there's not. So if you look at our scoring rubric, if the public participation and planning question, it's really about providing, I'm echoing for some reason, I don't know why, just enough detail so the evaluators can really make sure that your engagement is appropriate for the magnitude and complexity of the project. So it could look different for different types of projects. So we don't put a minimum at all, but I will say our evaluators are pretty good at judging what's appropriate. Lori, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that a lot of the things that guidelines are not places that we put every single detail in, because we have to allow flexibility. And believe me, as stakeholders and potential applicants, you want flexibility. If we put in the guidelines 10 plans that we will count as a appropriate active transportation plan, then you can be sure we'll leave out some. And then we've kind of locked ourselves into that. So we allow for flexibility in a lot of areas because it helps the program, and in particular, it helps the applicants.
Thanks, Lori.
We received one additional question from Emmanuel Martinez. They write, how will this apply to entities that do not have land use authority?
We can add some language in there. So you honestly should just explain that in your narrative in the application. We recognize that not all of our applicants have land use authority. And we can also look at that just to make sure it's clear in this language that we understand that. So, but that's also something that we can really reiterate in our scoring rubrics and in the application. And also, it's a great chance to highlight if you don't have land use authority, if you're doing coordination work with agencies that do have authority, that's also a great place to highlight it as well.
Thank you, Beverly. We had a couple of attendees with their hand raised initially, but were lowered. So if you intended to raise your hand, I do not see it at this time, just to let you know. But we did receive some additional written questions. The first comes from Lola Torney. They ask, could you give an example or two of how a project could answer this question? And they're referring to a question about housing language.
Sure. So that's a great question. And so this question was in sorry, not this whole thing, sorry, housing as a topic was included in the last cycle. So how the project will support existing and planned housing, especially affordable housing. So that language was in the cycle 5 large infrastructure project application. So my first suggestion to you is we post the successful applications on our website. And so I would recommend that there should be project type on our spreadsheet where we have everything. And I would suggest looking at large infrastructure applications and seeing how other successful agencies answered this question. So in terms of housing, I would say a good response would be talking about how the project links to any new housing developments or any affordable housing developments, especially in the context of, kind of linking that to any disadvantaged communities, and how the project maybe fits into the overall vision of your community's kind of goals for housing, making sure that housing is accessible to transit and how this project could help people access transit. And I don't know, Lori or Alika, if you guys have any ideas too, for how to answer.
So if it was me and I was doing an application, I would probably go to the Pro Housing Designation Program and see what it has in there, which you will likely find help in there in how to answer this question. So, and to be a little bit more explicit on this, there was legislation that created the Pro Housing Designation Program. Part of that legislation tasks the Department of Housing and Community Development to link this program to grant funding programs, including transportation grant funding programs. So that is what HCD is doing. However, it's not as easy as it might seem on the surface, particularly with the active transportation program. So that's why we are just introducing this, making sure everybody knows that this program is out there. And we would like people to go look at it and see if it's appropriate for your jurisdiction to apply for the program. If you if you can apply for the program and you will be applying for grant funding in the future, you probably want to think about applying for it, because you might see it more and more often. And as everyone knows, the housing is a very important issue with the administration. So right now, I think our best suggestion is please go out and look at the program and see if there's what kind of policies are in there, and if you have policies that align with those criteria.
Thanks, Lori. And also, another great place to kind of link in is if you have your local housing element and if it aligns with these pro housing policies as well. It's a great place to talk about that. Anything else, Justin?
Yes, Beverly, thank you. We do have one more written comment at this time. This comes from Lucy Cardenas. They write, does partnering with low-income loans for the city and housing count under the HCD program?
I do not know. So I would suggest going to their website and looking at the policies. The policies they're like divided into different categories. There's a wide range of them. I'm not really sure which ones are there, but you can go on their website and check it out. And if that's relevant to your project, even if it's not something that they include, definitely bring it up in your narrative.
All right, Beverly, not seeing any other public comment at this time. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Justin. And so the main feedback that I heard on this question was asking about agencies that don't have land use authority. So we can go back as a team and see if there's any adjustments we need to make to this question or to somewhere else, or to this criteria or somewhere else in the process to address that issue. So I guess I'll give it like, oh, hey, Lori.
Yeah, I would say that that the way we have this in the guidelines now is not detrimental to anyone that doesn't have land use authority. So really, we want to finalize this language now. So unless you have any like fatal flaws in this language, then this is going to be finalized, and this is what you will see in the guidelines. Because we've actually talked about this pretty extensively already.
All right, I'll give it another few seconds to see if anyone else has any final thoughts. And Justin, just let me know.
Sure thing, Beverly. Yeah, giving it a few more seconds. Still not seeing anybody at this time.
All right, well, I guess we can move on to the next topic, and if anyone thinks of anything, you can bring it up later, but hopefully we have finalized this. So next slide, please. All right, so the next topic that we wanted to finalize today was leveraging. So over the last few meetings, we've talked about this topic, and at previous workshops, we heard some differing perspectives from different stakeholders on whether we should, some stakeholders didn't want to score on leveraging anymore. Some find it to be really critical. And after hearing the group's feedback, we have decided that we're going to recommend proceeding with keeping it as it is. So medium and large applications will continue to be scored on leveraging, and we're not going to recommend any new leveraging sources at this time. That doesn't mean that next cycle we can't discuss this again. And kind of one of our reasons for wanting to keep it the same is that we're really trying to minimize the changes in the application this cycle, since there were so many unfunded applications last cycle. So we don't want to change things up too much, and so we didn't think there was a strong argument to change it at this time. So we are happy to take any more questions or comments on this topic, and I will hand it over to Justin to see if there are any.
Thank you, Beverly. Going to give it a few seconds. Not seeing any at this time. Yeah, still not seeing any right now. Oh,
Okay.
Wait, no, we got one coming in late.
Okay.
So we did get a written submission from Diana Mihan, who they write, Beverly, can you remind us what the cost threshold is for small, medium, and large?
So for small, medium, and large applications, it's actually a topic that we're going to discuss in a few slides, because one of the recommendations from this group has been to change those. So I think I'm going to hold off on responding to that just for a few minutes while we go through a couple other topics, because we will definitely address that today, because it might change. And so so Diana, if your comment is, any concerns about leveraging in the context of those thresholds, you can definitely bring that up when we discuss that topic in a few slides.
Okay, Beverly, not seeing any others at this time.
Okay, great. So we can move on, and if anything, and hopefully this is finalized, and if anyone else has any concerns, please bring them up during today's workshop at some point. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so the next topic that we were going to discuss is the potential set aside for non-infrastructure projects. So at our last workshop, we discussed a potential set aside for non-infrastructure projects. And based on what we heard, stakeholders seemed kind of split on this topic. And after reviewing the comments, we have decided to recommend not having a set aside for non-infrastructure this cycle. And of course, I think in the last workshop, there was a little bit of a misunderstanding about what we meant by set aside. So we just want to assure everyone that non-infrastructure projects will continue to be eligible for the program. They'll just be considered alongside all other project types in our kind of project selection process when we're making our set recommendations. However, we heard very clearly at our last workshop just how critical these projects are, and we completely agree. And we heard from many, many stakeholders that the prioritization of infrastructure over non-infrastructure projects in our tiebreaker for projects with the same score at the funding cutoff is not fair, and it makes it seem like non-infrastructure projects aren't as important. And so we definitely heard that that feedback from this group. And so we are recommending that we remove the prioritization of infrastructure projects on the tiebreaker so that non-infrastructure projects are given equal consideration when it comes to the tiebreaker. So that's our recommendation, and we are happy to take any questions or comments on this. So I will hand it back over to Justin.
Thank you, Beverly. We do have one attendee with their hand raised at this time. Up first, we have Jonathan Matz.
Hi, yes, thanks. And sorry I wasn't able to make the December meeting. This seems pretty reasonable to me. So just my hats off on that. I mean, and I know I'm coming to this late, so this is, maybe more suitable for next cycle, but that if, for example, there are two infrastructure projects that need to be decided on in the tiebreaker, if one is a combined project and the other is not, perhaps it would, make sense to reward the combined one rather than the standard one. And I just wanted to check in. I believe the last meeting I was at in which the set aside idea came up, I'd suggested that if anything was to be set aside, well, a fund were to be set aside for any category, that plans actually seem to be appropriate to me. I was just wondering if that idea was pursued at all, if the train's already left the station on that one.
So, and Lori, please chime in. I don't think we'll be pursuing any set asides beyond quick builds, which it won't really be a set aside. It'll be a max funding cap, but they'll be scored separately from other project types. And as you know, we currently have a cap on the number of plans. Sorry, not the number of plans, the percentage of funding that can go to plans. And we are not recommending to remove that at this time. And Lori, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say that we would not recommend a set aside for plans, and we really do not like recommending a set aside for anything. But with that said, we will continue to monitor what is getting programmed each cycle, and if we start seeing an issue where there is a particular project type that just is not competing well at all anymore, then we might have to make some adjustments. But we would probably prefer doing that in some way other than a set aside, unless it just becomes like the only possible way to do it.
Thanks, Lori. Thanks, Jonathan.
All right, Beverly, I do not see any other attendees looking to make public comment at this time.
Okay. Great. I guess we can move on, and if anything else, any other questions or concerns come up, again, please bring it up in today's workshop because we would really like to finalize this today. Next slide, please. All right, so another non-infrastructure topic that we discussed briefly at the last workshop is some concerns have been raised by a few stakeholders about the inclusion of enforcement as an eligible activity in non-infrastructure projects. So again, we discussed this briefly at the last workshop, but we really wanted to bring it up again today to give everyone a chance to weigh in. So we just wanted to give a brief overview of kind of what is currently funded in terms of enforcement activities in non-infrastructure. So this is, again, currently an allowable activity as part of a non-infrastructure project. And so generally, these ATP-funded enforcement activities have included things like student parent safety patrol programs or rewarding good behavior. And so ATP-funded enforcement programs really should focus on building positive relationships between law enforcement and the community. So we have, I believe, Emily Abrahams from Caltrans on the workshop today, and she is one of our non-infrastructure experts at Caltrans. And so I wanted to give her an opportunity just to add anything to what I just said and maybe to describe kind of some of the enforcement activities that we are currently or have funded in the past. So I don't know if you guys can find Emily.
Yes, Emily.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Yeah, so thank you so much. I wanted to just share that the point of enforcement activities as they are in NI programs are really aimed to deter unsafe behaviors and reinforce safe behaviors. So really a lot of the activities that we see in ATP non-infrastructure aren't strictly enforcement only, but they do overlap with other well-known E's of non-infrastructure programming, such as education and encouragement and even like pre-engineering. So yeah, they kind of cross a few of the E's really. And so some of these examples that we've seen in past projects are things like crossing guard programs. So specifically to train crossing guards. And I'll just make a note that the ATRC does have a crossing guard training program on our website, and it is currently being updated. And I know a lot of agencies and non-infrastructure program implementers utilize this training in their projects. So crossing guard is one of the activities. As mentioned, we see a lot of student and parent safety patrols. And these are kind of like community ambassadors or school ambassadors. And, you know, for parents, it gets parents trained and aware of how to encourage safe walking and biking behavior for all mode users. And then for students, it really provides like a leadership opportunity and a way for students to learn from their peers and kind of be role models of demonstrating and teaching safety concepts for biking and walking. We also see partnerships often with law enforcement, especially in open streets and demonstration project events, because those types of projects are closing roadways or temporarily reconfiguring roadways. So it is really important to have law enforcement partnered on those types of projects. I've also seen law enforcement help out by volunteering at bike rodeos at some Safe Routes to School projects. We also have seen some Vision Zero related non-infrastructure programs, and some of these may include targeted enforcement at school zones or along high injury corridors. And the point of this is really just to have a concerted effort to address speed management and protect the vulnerable users, the walkers and bikers, you know, along those corridors or at those locations. So sometimes law enforcement may be asked to be at a specific area or along a corridor where there may be known to be a history of bicycle or pedestrian injuries or fatalities. And also some of the speed management work may be done through like media campaigns. So that also is a way to educate on safe travel. And then also, as mentioned, you know, sometimes there are often good behavior awards or rewards for following traffic laws, and this also overlaps with encouragement. So those are some of the examples that maybe we've seen in past projects. We do feel like these activities, should be allowed, as they overlap with many of the E's in non-infrastructure programs. And the implementer, is the one who's going to be crafting their program. So we're proposing, I guess, not removing enforcement, but rather maybe reframing it. So with that being said, I did want to let you know some of the actions that we are planning on taking. And then please do comment on, if you suggest something different or you have a different opinion. We do want to hear that. So one thing we've done is we have removed the word enforcement itself from the ATP guidelines. And we reframed the NI definition into a more concise description that uses the words encouragement and education as a way to describe non-infrastructure. We still plan to review the application questions and the rubrics, again, to just not emphasize it, but just speak more generally about non-infrastructure in those prompts. On the ATRC side, we will be revising our enforcement fact sheet, and we will be pulling pieces off of that fact sheet and putting them into the other E's if they fall into like other categories. And then any of the remaining activities, we'll reframe them or reconsider them to see if they still are applicable. And we also want to create like a community partnership or community partnership fact sheet that discusses building positive relationships with law enforcement. So it'll be another resource that we'll make sure we develop. And again, it just kind of de-emphasizes the enforcement, but rather engagement as a whole. So those are kind of some of our actions that we've laid out. And again, yeah, I'd love to hear some discussion. So I'll pass it back to you.
Great, thank you so much, Emily. That was a really detailed and helpful overview. We will open it up again for any discussion or comments. And I'm sure Emily would love to get some feedback on sort of the action she just laid out. So I will pass it over to Justin for anyone who wishes to speak or provide a comment.
Thank you, Beverly. We do have one attendee with their hand raised. We have Jonathan Matz.
Hello again. So thanks for this. And again, sorry I missed the last meeting in which this was taken up. We had actually spoken with ETRC about these proposed changes, and we think this really makes sense. A lot of the activities mentioned we think of as really sort of more falling into the category of engagement, encouragement, and the like. When it's sort of parent and student groups doing it, we think of that as a really an entire different category entirely than what's traditionally understood by enforcement, I think. So we certainly support the kind of reframing of that as a kind of a clarification of how we think it makes most sense to think of those activities. And likewise, even though we're not advocating the step of directly not quote unquote allowing enforcement, in the sense of that individual applicants may still decide to have those partnerships, and some communities have better partnerships with law enforcement agencies than others, and that may be something that they want to build into programs. We do think that it's, at least in terms of like what ATP money can be spent on, really focusing on those more community-based activities, makes the most sense on that. And then, in particular, I'm not sure if this is planning to be brought up later today about the sustainability question about non-infrastructure components, but another reason that we really think we want to encourage communities to be investing in those parent teacher student-led activities is that law enforcement agencies will probably stop participating once the money dries up, but those groups won't be as likely to drop off. So really for those reasons, and consistent of the question asked in the application about how applicants are going to ensure the sustainability of their programs after the funding horizon, for those reasons, we thought that these shifts are appropriate.
Great, thank you so much, Jonathan. So we aren't talking about that sustainability question today, but that's certainly something that we can discuss when we discuss the application and the scoring rubrics. If there's some way we want to frame it to make sure we cover what you just said, we can definitely discuss that further. So thank you.
We did receive one additional written comment. This comes from Lucy Cardenas. They write, is applying for DUI grants part of education and encouragement for the program?
I don't know, Emily. I'm not entirely sure what a DUI grant is.
Yeah, I think that would maybe be something more about, you know, maybe like an OTS grant would cover that. But in terms of like encouraging biking and walking, I don't think that maybe directly applies.
Yeah, I agree. Anything else, Justin?
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Beverly, I've not seen any additional attendees looking to make public comment at this time, so thank you.
Great, thank you. So it sounds like we will proceed with the approach that Emily kind of outlined in terms of reframing enforcement and making sure we're really emphasizing kind of student and parent-led activities and just positive relationships. Great. So we can move on to the next slide or the next topic. All right, so the last topic that we previously have discussed that we wanted to go over today, we have some new topics after this as well, but this is the project size thresholds discussion. So I'll just go over kind of what they currently look like, and then I'll talk a little bit about some of our previous discussions on this. So our infrastructure projects have size thresholds, and each threshold or each project size has a slightly different application, with the knowledge that a large application is generally a little bit more complex than a small application because the project is bigger. So anyways, we expect a little bit more information from the applicant. So the size thresholds are based on total project cost. Currently, small applications are $2 million or less total project cost. Medium is over $2 million and up to $7 million in total project cost, and then large is over $7 million. So this was a topic that our stakeholders, so this group brought up as something to look at. And so we heard from a lot of stakeholders in the last workshop that this is something that that the group wants to adjust. And it sounded like this stakeholder group was concerned about things like rising construction costs. So a small project now doesn't necessarily look like a small project, 5 years ago. So anyways, the group thought that we should be regularly adjusting these thresholds in order to kind of account for things like inflation or increase in costs. So commission staff is open to doing this. Our only concern, and we would love to get some feedback on this, is that if we raise the project threshold specifically for the large application, it could cause some issues for applicants who wish to apply for pre-construction only. So currently, and this will not be changing this cycle, currently the small and medium applications must apply for construction. For a large application, applicants are allowed to apply for all phases, any phase through construction, or they can apply for pre-construction funding only. So for example, project may ask for $8 million, a huge project may ask for $8 million for, let's say, environmental. Let's say it's a really, really big project. So they may apply for that. $8 million, their total project cost. Oh, well, that doesn't really make sense. Anyways, it's total project cost. Anyways, a potential issue is that we could cut some projects out of like the pre-construction only, the opportunity to apply for pre-construction only, because they will no longer be considered a large application. So that's our only concern with changing these thresholds. So anyway, we can open it up for comments. We like to hear any more feedback, and then we're also interested to hear what people think the thresholds should be, just so we can get an idea of the changes that you want to see. So I will hand it over to Justin to see if there are any comments.
Thank you, Beverly. We do have one attendee with their hand raised this time. We have Corey Wilkerson.
Hey guys, I believe last time we spoke about this topic, you guys were going to look to see what applications from cycle 5 might fall into that category of applying for pre-construction that they might not be able to do that.
Yes, we did look into that. So I don't remember how many pre-construction only applications there were in total. There weren't that many,
Right.
but 2 of those applications, if we, for example, raise the threshold to $10 million, then 2 of those applications would no longer be eligible.
They would have to revise their cost estimates, assuming that there's some sort of inflation with those construction costs.
Yes.
Okay. And I think that I think obviously, like, I'm very much in support of increasing the threshold sizes, and think that it's something that we should be doing regularly. And I think that we should that if those particular applicants are looking to reapply again, that commission staff or Caltrans staff should consider just recommending that they reevaluate their cost estimates based on more recent costs, actual construction costs, because they may see that the price of their construction increase above the threshold. For large infrastructure, I would probably recommend 10 million or more, and for medium infrastructure, I would probably say 3 million or 3.5 million to 10 million would be where I would kind of shoot for.
Great, thanks, Corey.
Beverly, we did receive one written question from Robert Avadia. They ask, is the threshold total project cost or the grant request?
It's total project cost. Yeah, so what we see is, like, thinking of an example for, like, it's total project cost, and that's based on your total project cost. That's the application you fill out. And then for pre-construction only, when I think there was one that maybe one application we received last cycle that requested, I think, like 2 million for pre-construction, and their total project cost was like just about 7 million. So a project like that would be like cut out. But as Corey said, maybe they need to reevaluate their estimates.
Thank you, Beverly. Not seeing any other attendees right now indicating they want to make comments. So, thank you.
All right. So the last workshop, it seemed like there was a lot of support for changing these. So I assume with no one commenting that that has kind of remained the same. And then, I don't know, Lori, if you want to, we can go back and kind of go with Corey's suggestion of 10 million or as the cutoff for large.
I guess I'm a little bit confused because all kinds of people commented on this at the last workshop. So I don't know what's going on, if people have changed their minds or what, but we need to hear for sure that this is what stakeholders want, because we did go through our changes with our management. They didn't quite understand this. They were super thrilled by it, but they were okay to take our staff recommendations because we said that that was stakeholder recommendations. So we were hoping to hear more that this is, yes, this is for sure what we were hoping for, and suggestions on what should be the thresholds, because you know, particular applicants would know better than we would on what would be more appropriate.
Thanks, Lori. So anyone can raise your hand, or you can even just put your comment in the comment box and Justin can read it out, whatever is easiest for you. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Beverly. We did receive a few attendees who sent in written comment, and then we do have a few with their hand raised. I'll start by reading the written commentary we've received. The first comes from Deborah Murphy. She writes, I support over 10 million as a threshold for large projects. From Denise Montes, they write, I would support changing the current thresholds as suggested by Corey. From Jonathan Matz, Corey's proposed thresholds make sense to me. From Lucy Cardenas, they write, I think they should be reevaluated every cycle. Last year costs on construction material rose 23%. From Francais Levine Greater, they write, I agree with prior suggestion to raise medium to 3.5 million and large to 10 million. We have, let's see, I want to read one more real quick, and then I'm going to jump to the raised hand from Nafili Barrett. She writes, I support increasing the thresholds. I suggest a minimum of a 25% increase in each category. Now we will go to Louis Zhao, who's got his hand raised.
Thanks, Louis Zhao, OCTA. I'm not going to make a big deal of it like last time, but because Corey and I got in a large fight about it. But I'm supportive of increasing it. I think if we have a regular formula in the future, it would make sense. Just, I don't know, based on inflation is what I recommended last time. The one question I do have is, before we do the increase, has CTC staff reached out to the two agencies that would be impacted by this change? Because I think that would be interesting to hear if they had a strong take on this, if they plan to reapply. Because if anyone's going to be impacted, at least the immediate impact, it's going to be those two agencies. Thanks.
Yeah, we haven't done that yet, Louis. I think we will do that. I will say though that it is the responsibility of all applicants to make sure that they understand any changes that might have occurred in the program. So, but I would also hope that particularly, you know, people like you you have a lot of local agencies under your jurisdiction, if you could help us, particularly on this one, to make sure they understand the changes. And I could be wrong on this, but I think Caltrans put something in the application that you can't accidentally fill out the wrong application. So it might take a minute, but hopefully someone from Caltrans can confirm that, because we have had that issue probably in the 4th cycle of applicants accidentally filling out the wrong app, but I think we corrected that. So so bottom line is, yes, we will reach out to those two applicants, but also applicants need to understand that sometimes there are changes in the programming cycle.
Thanks, Lori. And then, Louis, you mentioned a formula each cycle, and I don't think that at this stage we could propose that for, to include in these guidelines, but that's certainly something we can bring back to our technical advisory committee to look into for future cycles, like putting together a standard formula.
Beverly, we have a couple more attendees with their hand raised at this time. Up next, we have Carl Anderson. Carl, you're free to unmute yourself and comment.
I must have misclicked. I didn't mean to raise my hand, but I am supportive of Corey's recommendation. But I do also recognize where Louis is coming from and understand that this may impact a few project sponsors. But Lori, I think I agree with you ultimately that it is the responsibility of each project sponsor to pay attention to the updated changes year after year. I don't think this is a significant change compared to last year, just because everyone has seen an increase in costs in construction, and so I think it moves with the trajectory of construction costs appropriately. I will also just add, I think there's somewhere in the guidelines that requires like a site visit for projects that exceed $10 million or more. I can't remember if that's in the guidelines or if that was just a recommendation. So we may need to change that number. I don't know if you want to discuss that now, but I just thought of that right now.
Thanks, Carl. We can go back and look at that and see if it's something we need to change and bring it back to the next workshop. Thanks for bringing that up. I will definitely write that down as a to-do item. Anything else, Justin?
Yes, Beverly, I'm going to read off a few more written comments I received, and then we do have one more attendee with their hand raised. Deborah Murphy writes, I also support the 3.5 to 10 million for medium. Robert Avadia writes, formulaic CPI adjustments make sense. Lucy Cardenas writes, I think it should be actual costs because at times inflation data is slower to update than per day material costs. From Amber Collins, they write, I'm supportive of increasing the thresholds for the reasons discussed. The suggestion of at least 25% makes sense given construction cost increases. We have Victoria Cacciatore, who has her hand raised. Victoria, you're free to unmute and make your comment.
Hello, this is Victoria Cacciatore with SACOG, and I think that the increase to 10 million for large infrastructure projects makes a lot of sense at the state level. My only concern would be the greater difficulty in downscoping projects or being able to carry an unsuccessful project through the state ATP to an MPO-led ATP competition without the ability to only ask for pre-construction. It's going to create more of a burden on applicants if they're trying to carry forward a project that's too large for their regional round, but doesn't meet the state threshold for large infrastructure.
Thanks, Victoria. I'm not sure, I don't know, Lori, if you have any input on that.
I have no idea how to answer that. That would be, I'd have to hear from the other MPOs on what they would think about that. That didn't come up in the last discussion. So I don't know. I don't know if that's an issue. And is it an issue such that we should not do this?
Yeah.
Oh,
go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was still able to speak. I would hope that there would be some way that we could maybe further discuss options, because everything that people have said on behalf of like how this would impact the state competition which is most of what we've been discussing for today. That all makes a lot of sense, but hopefully we'd be able to discuss some possible options between CTC and the MPOs.
Sure. I don't know if any of the other MPOs want to weigh in on that right now. We can also take this back afterwards. But this is a great time to chime in on the issue that Victoria just raised, if any other MPOs want to provide comment.
Beverly, we have Corey Wilkerson.
Victoria, can you give us an example of what you mean by, I'm just having a hard time wrapping my head around what exactly the issue might be.
Sure. This most recent active transportation program round, we had a project sponsor who proposed a bike ped overcrossing of a freeway. The estimated cost for that overcrossing was, I think it was between 7 and 8 million. I mean, I think we could all say like, it's probably going to end up being more than that. But at this point, that is their best set of cost estimates. So they're able to apply for, for PAED, PS&E only through the regional ATP with like for projects that you're going to have that are like still reasonably under $10 million, such as like some smaller bridges. You're not going to be able to do half a bridge to scale it into something that is going to result in a constructible phase like you need to do with your medium and small infrastructure projects. Whereas with large infrastructure projects, you're able to say, how about you just fund everything through right of way?
Right. Okay, I see what you're saying. You're saying that when it's a large project, there is an opportunity for them to downscale by just funding the pre-construction phases. I would kind of suggest those if you're looking at cost estimates from 2 years ago, we've seen considerable increases in construction costs, particularly over the last 2 years because of the pandemic and supply issues and things like that. But I would have them reevaluate their cost estimates before applying for cycle 6, because it's very likely that a project that was 7 or 8 million last cycle for the total project cost would likely be over 10 million this cycle. And that's the whole reason why we're proposing to increase the threshold, is because the costs have increased roughly about 25% from 2 years ago to present time. So yeah, that would be my only kind of pushback, would be have them relook at it. In all likelihood, it probably will be over the threshold that we're proposing. And that's the entire reason why we're proposing that threshold. But yeah, I agree. Bridges are tricky to scale down, that's for sure.
Thanks, Corey and Victoria.
Beverly, we received one additional written comment. This comes from Lucy Cardenas. They write, how will raising the thresholds affect rural cities?
So if anyone from a rural region, I know Nafili, you had commented, if you want to chime in. As far as we know, from commission staff's perspective, this is actually, we're doing this because this is what applicants want, because costs are increasing. So I don't see this as something that would particularly negatively affect rural communities. But Lori, if you want to chime in, or if we have anyone from the Rural Counties Task Force that wants to chime in as well, we would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I don't think this would be any different from for rural cities. And we heard strongly from Woody and Nephili last workshop that this is something that they wanted.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure we've heard that the cost increases are even worse in rural communities as well.
You know, the big differences, other than the actuality of projects going up, the differences in terms of the program are that the small application is easier than the medium and the large. So say we change the small threshold to be up to 3.5 million, then there would be theoretically more projects that would be filling out that small application, and it would be a bit easier for them. And then on the other hand, there's the issue of only the large projects can request pre-construction only.
Thanks, Lori.
Beverly, I'm not seeing any other attendees looking to make a comment at this time.
Okay, great. Thanks, Justin. And thanks everyone for chiming in with your comments. We really appreciate it. So it sounds like there's still some support there's still a lot of support for raising these thresholds. And to me, it sounded like people supported Corey's proposal. And also there was some support for a 25% increase as well. So we can go back and come up with some final numbers, and also talk a little bit more to Victoria and some other reps from MPOs to address any of those concerns. Lori, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I guess other than Victoria's concerns, which maybe we could, that can be dealt with within the MPO individual guidelines, I'm not sure, but generally it still sounds like there is support for this. And I think my proposal, since we haven't heard differences on numbers, would be for the large to be now 10 million. And if the large is going to be 10 million, I think that the small would go up to 3.5 million. So, and remember, it's total project cost. So the small would be up to 3.5 million, and then the medium would be 3.5 million up to 10, and then the large would be over 10 million.
Great. Yeah, that sounds good. So we'll go back and talk to Victoria again and the other MPOs, but if anyone wants to weigh in on that proposal that Lori just laid out, we can do that now, and if not, we can move on. All right.
Beverly, just giving it a few seconds, but we did receive one supportive comment from Ivan Garcia. BCAG supports Lori's comments, and that's all I'm seeing at this time.
Great. Thank you so much, Justin. All right, we can move on to the next slide. And I believe Lori is taking over here.
Thank you, Beverly. Okay, this is a new section, and this one we wanted to talk to all of you specifically because we want to make sure we get this language right. This is more of a project delivery issue, so we kind of need help on it. So what has come up in the program, particularly since the projects that we fund have gotten larger over the cycles, is that we get requests to segment a project sometimes. And the reason for this is to help project delivery. And I wouldn't say I know a lot about this and all the situations where this comes up. Typically, I think it's a right-of-way issue where there might be a difficulty in getting right-of-way in one section of the project. So the implementer wants to continue on working on the project, but they need to segment off one part of the project while they work on the right-of-way issues. So we've done this before, but it's not in the guidelines. And every time we do it, I'm never quite sure what we're doing. So we need to get some parameters down so we're not trying to figure it out every time it comes up now. So this is our proposal for the new section. Is it would say project segmenting, that we'll consider project segmenting. And just so you know, this is a programming action, so it will go to a commission meeting. So if you're ever going to do this, you have to pay attention to the meeting schedule and everything, but it's not usually a problem. It's just want to make sure everyone know that it is a programming action that has to be voted on at a commission meeting. Okay, so each project phase must remain programmed in the fiscal year which it was originally programmed. And then an agency may only request to segment a project once during the life of a project, and the submittal process will be similar to that of scope changes, which means that it would go to Caltrans and they would look it over, make sure it makes sense. The commission staff is not engineers, but most of the Caltrans staff, ATP staff has the engineer, so they'll look at it from that perspective. And then Caltrans will send commission an analysis and recommendation to commission staff. So that's a language that we have. Please give us some comments on this if this makes sense. Did we miss anything? Did we inadvertently put in something that is going to make things worse, or anything like that? So right now we are just looking for some help on this language.
Thank you, Lori. We do have attendees with their hands raised at this time. Up first, we have Louis Zhao.
Thanks, Louis Zhao of CTA. So I'm trying to digest this a little bit, but I think I understand the intent of this. The one thing that bothers me with this is the second bullet. Each project phase must remain programmed in the fiscal year in which it was originally programmed. Because when I'm thinking about a use case for this, I'm thinking about projects. For example, we've had a long discussion about the projects that use railroad right away or any utility corridor. And those projects are, a lot of changes in those are really not under, they can't be controlled, right? It's up to the utility owner or the railroads that control those properties. And when we segment properties like that or segment a project like that, typically you would probably have to delay the second segment or third segment to the project. And a lot of the changes that happen on those projects are very unpredictable. So that's really the one thing I'm looking at right now that kind of bothers me with this. The rest seems okay, but I'll have to digest this a little bit more. I guess my first question to commission staff is, what are you envisioning with this process then? Is it just to make sure that we deliver projects on a timely manner? Because if that's the case, that second bullet might be problematic. Thanks.
Beverly, were you gonna say something?
I mean, I can address that question, but you can also address it.
No, you go ahead.
So where we've had these segmenting requests is instances, it's usually a pretty complex project, including projects near rail. Instances where they have like this big project and they want to start working, continue working on one portion of it, but they're still working through, for example, a right-of-way issue near a rail or something. So this is essentially letting them proceed with that one, with whatever segment's ready. And then the other segment where they need more time, we're saying it has to remain programmed in the fiscal year where it was originally programmed, but they could potentially request a separate time extension just for that segment. So they would still have to like abide by the timely use of funds policy, but that segment would be kind of on a separate timeline. And when we give time extensions, the funds are still programmed in the same fiscal year that they were originally programmed. I don't know, Lori, if you want to add to that.
No, and Louis, the reason that we're doing this is that it seemed to be something that the stakeholders wanted because it's been requested, and we've actually taken the actions to do this. I don't know, 2 or maybe 3 times. So we thought it would be helpful for project delivery.
Okay, so I think that's a great explanation. I think the one thing I would recommend is at least allowing for that extension process to happen in conjunction with the scope change or however you're treating this, because when we do it as one document, it makes it a lot easier, at least on the applicant and product delivery side, to not have to submit multiple requests and track multiple requests. And the worst case scenario is that some of these requests get lost or their actions get lost and something doesn't get updated. And we've had experiences with that already. So it's a worry that I would have, is having 3 or 4 requests come through just for one, really effectively as one individual change. But I do like this. I think it makes a lot of sense. I do have a lot more questions on it, but I can hold those for later, because I'm just thinking about how this would work on an allocation standpoint and contract award standpoint. Thanks.
All right, Beverly, we did receive a few more questions and comments, and we do have some attendees with their hands raised at this time. The first written comment comes from Padma Assam. They write, "We welcome this because we have run into project delays because of utility relocations that are out of control of the implementing agency." From Corey Wilkerson, he asks, "I assume this language has been reviewed by Caltrans and signed off?"
I don't know if it has been reviewed by Caltrans, although I just sent Desiree a text making sure that hopefully she's looking at this, and I want to make sure that she's okay. But Beverly, did they see this?
Yeah, so actually, Alika, if you go to the next slide, this was kind of a bulleted overview of what we're proposing, but this is the actual language that we're proposing. So Caltrans has reviewed this, and they did provide us comments, and we changed a few things based on their comments. But if anyone from Caltrans, Desiree or Trina or anyone else has additional feedback, we definitely want to hear it because we want to make sure we're doing this correctly.
Yes, we do have Desiree Fox. Desiree, you're unmuted and free to comment.
Hi, everyone. This is Desiree Fox from Caltrans. I think that this would be perfectly fine, as long as we can, work this out within the guidelines. And it's been done before a couple of times, as mentioned. And, essentially what happens is we end up creating multiple projects. And so that's how it would go forward. And to answer the question as far as moving those phases to different fiscal years, that would probably be either a separate action, or it would be something more along the lines of why we use time extensions, because that's a lot of times the reason that we have time extensions is because of those right-of-way concerns. So Yes, we are in support of it, and we have already figured out how to move along with the process for the most part.
So I guess what we're saying is that we're already kind of doing it, but we want to make sure that we have it documented correctly, and that so we're doing it the same way each time. Do you have anything else, Justin?
Yes, I have one more written question to read off, and then I have a couple of attendees with their hand raised at this time. The written question comes from Ivan Garcia. He writes, regarding segmenting, curious as to how often this comes up.
It doesn't come up a lot. It didn't used to come up at all, but it comes up more frequently now. Like I said, because of the larger projects. And I think the thing is when this has come up, we didn't see any reason why we shouldn't do this. They do this, I think, in the STIP. So it was just making sure it's in the guidelines, so we have a set procedure.
We have a couple of attendees with their hand raised at this time. Up first, we have Carl Anderson.
Hi there, Carl Anderson with MTC. I think it's a great idea to articulate the process and the guidelines. That'll be helpful for anyone that may be considering this. I do share Lewis's concern about not being able to change the phasing on any of the funds that we were, I guess, splitting out. But I do recognize it's already in the guidelines that schedule changes to the funding years are not allowed or will not be considered. So knowing that this happens to a few projects over the course of each cycle, it seems like this happens because of some kind of really extenuating circumstance. So maybe if CTC would consider, I guess, in their review of it, allowing a little bit of a schedule delay or reprogramming to a new fiscal year, and then giving that new phased project the opportunity to still pursue an extension on top of that. I think that would be very helpful for when this issue does come up. But I know that might be opening up a can of worms, but just an idea I wanted to throw out there. Because I also share Lewis's concern about the award process. Because if we're splitting out into two projects and we have a contractor that's willing to do one phase of the project, does the agency have to go out and rebid and go through the contract award process all over again, or can they just use the one that's already existing? And so I think that is going to be a tricky situation there, especially if we're splitting construction across two projects. So those are my comments.
So on we would not allow the reprogramming, and I think if we allowed that on segmenting, there would be suddenly a lot of projects that needed segmenting, because that would be the only instance that we would allow it. So totally. I think it would be a way then for agencies to reprogram at least part of their project. So that would not be something that we would consider.
Yeah, and I recognize that because, yeah, I don't want the system to be abused either, but maybe CTC comes up with an explicit direction of what would trigger the allowance of that, whether or not UPR is involved or whether or not there is some significant right-of-way issue with a utility company or something like that, other than just, the city of wherever drug their feet and they just failed on this project and they came up with the idea to split it out to save face.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I don't think that we would, I don't know, we could talk about that, Carl. I can't see that being supported by management, but we could ask about that.
Yeah, and I understand that, just throwing the idea out there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next, we have Corey Wilkerson.
Okay, so first of all, like, obviously this is intended to be a tool for local agencies to be able to deal with changes in their project that are outside of their control. So in that regard, we will SCAG supports this. But one of the questions that I have is it possible to, I have two questions actually. Is it possible to, if we're splitting it out into two projects, to recombine those projects at a later date? So it goes back to just being one project once, say, whatever the right-of-way section is addressed and taken care of, and the city's getting ready to bid. That way they're not bidding two separate projects at the same time or having to stagger bidding or things like that. Can the projects be recombined once they've been segmented?
I have no idea how to answer that. I would need help probably from Caltrans. This is getting into
Getting the weeds, I'm sorry.
project delivery than I am familiar, to be totally honest. So I need help.
Desiree.
Teresa's gonna, yeah, she's gonna comment. So I am gonna get help from my boss. So Teresa's gonna comment on this. So Teresa.
Teresa, you're now muted and free to comment.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the whole purpose of segmenting is the deliverability to be able to deliver your project. Now, as Lori said, there is absolutely, I find it very difficult for us to reprogram the project in a different fiscal year just because of the competitive nature of the program. Okay, that's number one. Number two, in regards to eventually combining the project at a later date, the whole purpose of the segmenting is because an agency is ready to deliver a portion of the project and not another portion. So if later on you're able to combine it, I guess you could. The problem is that we cannot allocate to a project that has already been awarded. So the purpose of a segmenting is for you to be able to award a project or a portion of a segment, and in essence, it becomes two projects. So they will be tracked as two projects. So if later you're able to segment it and stay within the statutory requirements, I guess you could. I find that a little bit difficult.
I'm more thinking about it from a reporting standpoint, from where a local agency has to report on, say project closeout for, now they have to report on for two separate projects rather than just a single project.
Right, and that's the disadvantage. I mean, it has its advantages and the disadvantages, and that would be the disadvantage, is that you're now awarding two separate projects.
And you're having to report on two separate, I mean, that
exactly.
I think that for the local agency, if this is their option, they're gonna probably buy off on that, because at least they're able to deliver their project. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to do it.
That is correct. And I think it provides a lot of flexibility for the local agency. Like Lori said, we're already doing that in many of the other programs, as well as the ATP program. We're just kind of formalizing it and putting some like parameters and rules and kind of set the expectations and a process in place. So, each individual project has its own challenges. And as you know, we've worked with every single agency as those challenges arise. But we're just trying to kind of set the stage and set the expectations in a process.
No, that's great. I appreciate you guys doing this. Having worked at a local agency, I'm happy to hear that you guys have already been doing this and working with the local agencies to figure out how they can deliver projects. And now we're trying to formalize that.
Right. Oh, you know what? Just real quick, I know Louis or Carl made a comment in regards to the railroad. I think this is the absolute reason why we would want to have this flexibility, because we've all have experience with the railroads, and you know, everything is cleared except for a tiny little portion.
Right.
Okay, then proceed with your larger project. Let's move on, and that way you don't jeopardize the whole thing.
So my last question is there a way that we can set the language to discourage situations where a local agency is going to segment the project and then at some point they're going to cancel one of those segments? I don't want to see a system in place that allows for local agencies to not deliver the full project as originally scoped, and as a way of kind of bypassing not constructing the full project and still getting the benefits of reimbursement and all that kind of stuff.
Well, now we get into a programming change, and I think there's another section for that. And so that is definitely the concern, and that is definitely something that we will be very cognizant, cautious, because at the end of the day, we want to deliver the project that was promised, that was selected, that was recommended for funding. So, but this is in a way, segmenting is a very good tool because it provides that flexibility and allows the agency to kind of look at their project and assess the risk and determine how best to deliver the project.
Great. Again, like I said before, very much in support of this. Thank you guys for doing this. I think it's a great option for local agencies on the deliverability side. And you know, I just wanted to voice some concerns, and I know that there's ways that we can work around that. So thank you.
Yeah, and we would not allow for if a project was segmented, they would still have to deliver the full project, or you know, we would be in a whole scope change issue and everything like we would normally. Anything else, Justin?
Yes, thank you, Lori. We do have one more attendee with their hand raised at this time. We have Carl Anderson.
Lori, sorry, I forgot to raise my hand down, but Lori just said it. I mean, Corey, we already have those protections in place in the timely use of funds section. So if an agency doesn't build the bit that they are supposed to, they have to pay that money back, even if they already got reimbursed for it. It's just a matter of, yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah, and thank you, Teresa, for helping out on that. Anything else, Justin? Okay, so I think I'm hearing that this is good. If anybody that has a lot of experience with project delivery, if you look at this and you do see any issues with the language, let us know. But if we don't hear anything on this, and then this would be the procedures that we would follow, and this is what we would put in the guidelines. Okay. Okay, so this is just something that we discussed with the MPOs, and this is for the MPO component. And this, what has been happening is with the size of the projects, sometimes the MPOs are having trouble programming the projects because they don't have their funding programming capacity is not large enough for them to program sometimes even one project. So what some of the MPOs have done in their regional guidelines is they have put in there that they can submit a project to the state, but then they can submit a downscoped version of the project to the MPO component. So this is another thing. This is kind of already happening, but we just thought we would put this in there so all the MPOs are aware that that as part, if they do a supplemental call for projects, MPOs may allow applicants to downscope or provide a scalability plan for statewide submitted projects. So the scalability plan is something that MTC uses for projects when they submit a smaller version to, or they have a plan for if they don't get awarded in the state, but they are competitive in the MPO, but they need to scale it back because there's not enough funds for the larger project. They have to have a plan for how to scale it back. So I'll pause, see if there's any comments on this.
I'm going to give it a few seconds, but we did receive a late submission during the last segment. They ask if project segmenting can be requested after an approved allocation.
Say that again.
If the project segmenting can be requested after an approved allocation.
No.
No. No, we'd have to go back to the last slide just to check on the language. Let's see. I thought we had it in there. Don't we have it in there, Beverly, somewhere?
No, we can go back and add something in. I'm just thinking we would need to make sure it's clear, because I think we've had agencies come in for, I could be wrong, segmenting after they've already received, say, like their environment, they've gone through environmental, but now they've moved on to right-of-way and they're having trouble with a portion of the right-of-way. So they've segmented at that point because they've been able to obtain the necessary right-of-way for a portion of it. So I think maybe we should go back and talk to Caltrans and see if we need to add language in there.
Yeah, and Teresa says no.
Teresa also says no.
Okay.
From Corey Wilkerson, they write, we are in support of the downscoping language. A question from Denise, they write, are partially funded MPO projects that were not downscoped still eligible to reapply to complete their full funding request in subsequent cycles?
Can you say that again, Justin? I have to really focus on what you're saying.
Sure, no problem. Are partially funded MPO projects that were not downscoped still eligible to reapply to complete their full funding request in subsequent cycles?
So I think what I'm hearing is that an applicant submits a project to the state. It doesn't get awarded. They get awarded in the MPO for partial funding or maybe pre-construction. And so the question is, can they resubmit to the state in a future cycle? So the answer to that would be yes, if I'm understanding that question correctly. If the MPO is funding just a downscoped version, then they could submit for the part of the project that got cut out. They can submit for that in the next cycle, the ATP too. I hope I'm understanding that correctly.
From Jennifer Solis, they write, Fresno COG is supportive of the downscoping language. We have a couple of attendees with their hand raised at this time. Up first, we have Carl Anderson.
Lori used MTC as an example when you're talking about this, so obviously we're supportive of this language and we appreciate you including it in the guidelines. I do also just want to make one comment about the last item on whether or not project segmenting would be allowed after an allocation. I don't think it should be allowed after a construction allocation, but there could be a scenario where someone has received an allocation for right-of-way work, and during the right-of-way phase is when they discover a much larger issue with the project requiring the segmenting to take place. So I think it just including a sentence saying this won't be allowed after construction allocation is appropriate, but still allow that flexibility for the pre-construction phases.
Yeah, and I think that's what Beverly was saying, but I'll double check that with Teresa
Okay.
after and make sure I'm understanding what she's wanting to.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Carl.
Next, we have Corey Wilkerson.
Lori, I want to go back to that the previous comment about reapplying for downscoped projects. If a project comes in and is partially funded at the MPO component, they're required to update their PPR to outline additional funding sources that they're going to be using in order to complete the project as proposed. If they've identified in their PPR that they're going to be using local funds, and then they want to come back in the following cycle and reapply for and supplement a project from where essentially a project would be getting funded from two separate cycles, that is not allowed, correct?
No, because that would be supplanting funds.
Correct. That's just what I wanted to make sure was clear.
Yeah.
I was worried that question may have been related to that.
Okay, thanks, Corey.
We received one additional written comment from Victoria Cacciatoria. They write, SACOG appreciates the ability to downscope projects and the clarification in the guidelines. I am not seeing any additional comment or attendees with their hand raised at this time.
Okay, thank you, Justin. Okay, so it sounds like this language is good, so we'll move on. Okay, so we got through everything except for there's one thing that I just wanted to mention verbally that came up yesterday. And so we were having a discussion with the MPOs, and an issue came up where we have, the last few years at least, we have been at various times kind of scanning the program and capturing any savings that come up. And savings can happen in the program usually when a project either lapses for whatever reason, it just is not deliverable anymore, or a agency just purposely gives up a project. At times the project sometimes the project ends up getting done through some other means, or they lose community support for the project. It doesn't have a lot, but it does happen. And when the program was first established, any savings that came up in the program, they went back to the state highway account. So we argued that they should go back to the program. So we sweep the program to gather those savings, and then we use them at different ways. The first use is typically because we have a project that was programmed in the current cycle. So I'll use cycle 5, the last cycle, as an example. It was at the cutoff line for funding, either in the statewide or the small urban and rural. So say we are programming in the statewide, and we're down to the end, we have $5 million left to program in the statewide component. The next highest scoring project has requested $10 million, okay? So what we have done the last couple cycles is we will go ahead and program that $10 million project, but we will program it for the $5 million. But we commit as much as possible to that agency that we will work with them to fully fund the project. So So any savings that we find, that's been our first priority, is fully funding those projects, fully programming those projects that end up at the cutoff line. And then if we have other savings, then we've been trying to gather them before the fund estimate of the next cycle coming up. And then we will also add to the fund estimate for the next program. And we're doing this because we're trying to capture every dollar to the program because it is so underfunded. When it just goes into the fund estimate, it goes through the regular split into the 50 to statewide, 40 to the MPO, and 10 to the small urban and rural. So there was a request that when we're trying to capture those savings, if the lapsed project was in the MPO component, for example, can we make sure that those captured funding savings go back to that particular MPO? So we had a discussion about this, and there's a couple, so staff does not generally support this for a couple reasons. One is it's very, very difficult administratively to try to keep those funds back to that particular component of which it was originally. Also, it is typically savings come from a project that fails. And so it didn't seem like a strong incentive then for projects that are trying not to fail to not fail. And also that it's better for the program if we can just get every dollar into the program as a whole and then have it go through the regular split. So I did talk to my executive director about this last night, and he said that the management would not support this either. But I want to make sure that I told the whole group that this discussion came up, because it's not just an MPO issue, it is an issue for all of the stakeholders. So I'm happy to listen to comments on it, but it's not something that commission staff will support. But if anybody has any comments, we are happy to hear them.
Thank you, Lori. We have Louis Zhao with his hand raised at this time.
Thank you. This is Louis Zhao, OCTA. I haven't had time to really dive too much into this, but I guess my initial question is what is in statute? Because my thing is that if we are taking away funds that were supposed to be programmed to an MPO, and the statute
Louis,
says 40% of the funds should be going.
Louis,
yeah,
we're not taking away. We're not taking away. The project has lapsed, and there's nothing in statute about this. But go ahead.
Okay. Well, that's what I'm trying to ask is
Okay.
what is the limitation in statute? Because if there's a limitation in statute, that's something that we should probably follow first. But if
Okay.
there's no limitation in statute, I don't really have an opinion on this. I mean, my preference is that it goes back to the MPO. But I'll let Corey kind of handle that fight.
Yeah. So the other thing I want to tell everybody, if this ends up becoming an issue, then I think what we have not done in the past, but we do have it in the guidelines that we would consider it, is that if we have agencies that are not delivering, we could reduce their points if they apply in a future cycle. We have not enforced that, but we could. Okay. Just give it another minute here. Okay. Okay. So Okay.
Thank you, Lori. We have Corey Wilkerson. Corey, you're free to unmute yourself and comment.
Sorry, I know that I'm the one that kind of brought this issue to the forefront, and so I figure I should at the very least comment back. While we don't agree with the CTC staff's and management's recommendation, I understand where you guys are coming from. I understand that what is being requested is definitely is. It complicates things. It makes things a little bit of a logistical and administrative nightmare to make sure that we're tracking those funds. And so I respectfully disagree, but I appreciate the CTC considering this topic and at least providing a response to us and for taking the time to kind of fully discuss this as part of the outreach process and the stakeholder engagement process for this round of guidelines. So thank you.
Thanks, Corey.
Next, we have Carl Anderson.
I just wanted to say that MTC is supportive of any lapse funds within the regional NPO program going back within that region, but I fully recognize how thorny of an issue this is, and we'll do some more homework on the potential impact of it, but just wanted to recognize our support of it. Thanks.
Thanks, Carl.
Not seeing any other attendees indicating they wish to make public comment at this time. Well, we do now have Louis Zhao.
Sorry, my mic was flipped up right. So Lori, maybe I'm just trying to ask questions here because I'm trying to get an understanding of how difficult this will be to do. In the event of savings from a project and that goes back into the pot, is it just deprogrammed and added back into the next cycle? I think that's what's been happening with that, right?
So I tried to explain how we're handling it. So Louis, did you understand what I said about projects at the line?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's been our first, and you know, I understand that you are gonna be maybe, okay, so last cycle, the project at the line, I think, if I remember correctly, Beverly might have to help me, in the statewide, it was a national city project. In the small urban and rural, it was the Shasta County. Both of them, we did not have enough funds to fully program those projects. So, you know, we have to figure out what we're gonna do. And so what we have done that seemed like the most fair, because those were the highest scoring projects, is to go ahead and program them. And then see as time goes on, if we have some savings that we get to fully fund those projects. I think if what has come up with this issue of the savings going back to the particular component, I think we're going to have a hard time doing that. And I would wish that everyone would be more supportive of other projects in the program, that they are happy to make sure that we're getting fully programmed projects no matter where they are. And then, so that's the first use. But then we also, if we have more savings, that we don't need to put them on a particular project because it's under programmed, we do ask that it goes into the fund estimate if we can, if the timing works out, and then it goes through the regular split, and then it helps everybody. So, and just as a reminder, initially, we didn't keep the funds at all. They went back to the state highway account. And it's a lot of work on our part and Caltrans' part to make sure that we're gathering those savings. And we've done that to try to fund as many projects as we can. in the program. Yeah, and I guess I was a little bit surprised when this came up, because I would have thought everyone would be glad that we are just trying to get every dollar back to the program as a whole. Louis, are you still there?
Yeah, I mean, that answers the question. I was just simply asking it out of ignorance. Thanks.
Okay. What else? Okay.
We have Woodrow Deloria looking to make public comment. Woody, you're free to unmute yourself and comment.
Hey, Lori, Happy New Year.
Hi, Woody.
I am just speaking out in support of the effort to get more projects funded. You know, oftentimes from El Dorado County, a lot of our projects are right at that cutoff line. So I for one appreciate that. You know, we always say here with El Dorado County Transportation Commission, we program to projects, not to jurisdictions. And I think that's the intent of ATP as well. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Woody. So, I just had something else I was going to say. So, because we are sweeping the program all the time, trying to capture those savings, we have less and less of it all the time. In the beginning, because the first cycle, maybe the first 2 cycles, we weren't doing this. We had like some accumulated savings then that we were able to put back into the program. But because we're doing this all the time now, there's not nearly as much as I think the first time we put together savings. I don't know, we had maybe 40 million or something. It was a decent amount, but it's just not happening now because we're using every dollar we can. Okay, so I'm gonna pause just for another minute, because what we're going to be doing next are we got through everything as far as we know that has come up as policy changes, and either that we have brought up or that stakeholders have brought up. We worked through all of those. What we have now are what we're calling administrative changes and wording changes, and this, I will admit, may not be the most exciting part of the workshop, although I'm sure Beverly is going to make it as exciting as she can. But I think it's important that we make sure that all of the stakeholders see these, because sometimes we change wording because it's just not making sense, or we need to clarify it. And every once in a while when we do that, we inadvertently make a change that we didn't mean to, and a stakeholder can catch that. So that's why I think it's important that we make sure everyone sees these. While I'm talking here, I'll just see if there's any other questions or comments on other things before we move on to administrative changes and wording changes, because I just want to be clear, we're really, other than the little things that we've talked about today that we may be refining, we are moving on from any kind of more policy changes in the program. Also, before Beverly starts, she's going to talk about how we will, how we're going to post the guidelines in the meeting book for the January meeting, just so everybody understands how you can see the changes in the program. Anything, Justin? Not seeing anything. Okay, then I will turn the floor back over to Beverly.
Thanks, Lori. Yeah, so I can quickly talk about what Lori mentioned about the upcoming meeting book. So the meeting book for the January commission meeting, I believe, will be posted this Friday afternoon. And as you all know, we do have some more workshops coming up, including one next week. So not everything will be finalized, although we did get through most of the major policy changes today. So how it will be posted is a clean copy will actually be attached to the book item. So if you're looking at the digital version and you click on that agenda item, you'll go to the book item that kind of describes the guidelines, and then the attachment will be a clean copy of the guidelines, which will not have any indication of what the changes are. It'll just be kind of the proposed guidelines as they stand now. However, we will also be linking within the book item to a marked up version of the guidelines that will show changes as compared to the Cycle 5 or 2021 program. So those changes will be in strike through. Anything that's being taken out will be in strike through, and then anything that's being added will be in bold underline. And there will be some things in there that we probably won't get through today. So some things that you may have seen before. So we are going to differentiate between the items that have gone through the stakeholder group and those that haven't yet. So I think what we decided is that items that haven't gone through the stakeholder group yet will be in italics, bold underline italics, and then those that have will just be bold underline. However, we'll write somewhere, so just in case that changes, you'll be able to tell. There'll either be like some sort of key or something, so you can tell what has gone through the group and what hasn't. So hopefully that makes sense, and you can always shoot us any questions when you read it, if you have any. Okay, so we are going to talk about some more administrative changes now, more to like the administration of the program rather than anything to do with the project application. So the first thing we wanted to talk about was a few changes to scope changes. Next slide, please. So this first slide is talking about a few things that we'll be asking for, that we'd like to ask for as part of scope change requests. And so if your agency has ever gone through a scope change, or you've helped someone with a scope change, you know that we ask for a few different things. So these are just a few additional items that we are adding to that list. So the first bullet is kind of just an explanation of if part of the scope change is that you're removing scope because it has been delivered through a different project. We want to ensure that first we want an explanation of why it was delivered, like which project it was delivered through or will be delivered through, and then why you use that other funding source rather than the ATP. And we're only adding this because this is something that we've seen increasingly, and mainly minor scope changes. You know, maybe an agency did some sort of repaving project, and they did some of the ATP elements as part of that project and integrated it in, and so they're wanting to do a scope change with us. So we just want an explanation, and then we also wanted to put in the guidelines, it says, if the scope change is approved, the agency must continue to report on any items that were in the original ATP scope but were or will be completed through a different project or funding source. So that's just part of our effort to ensure that the agency is still delivering the project as applied for and as scored in the ATP, just because of the competitive nature of the program. And then the next bullet on this list is an identification of any funding sources used to complete the project that were not included in the original project application. Basically, we just want an update on how the agency is funding the project, and then an identification of any savings expected due to the reduction or modified scope. So this just means if scope is being removed for some reason and the agency thinks there might be savings, we just want to see it up front. It may not necessarily happen, but we just want that included as part of the submittal. So those are all just kind of part of the submittal process. A few more things that we'll be asking for, and we can open it up for any comments now. So I'll hand things over to Justin.
Thank you, Beverly. Just going to give it a few more seconds.
Thank you.
We have one written question that's come in from Colin Clark. They write, do the program criteria allow for projects to be bundled across jurisdictions to encourage cost efficiency and faster implementation? What is the minimum grant application dollar amount per jurisdiction?
I'm not entirely sure what that question means. I don't know, Lori, if you know, or if we should ask them to come off mute and ask us.
I think, Justin, I think I understood the last part, which was if there's a minimum request, and the minimum request is 250,000, except for plans and maybe non-infrastructure. I'm not sure. I didn't quite understand the first part either. Yeah.
To read again, do the program criteria allow for projects to be bundled across jurisdictions to encourage cost efficiency and faster implementation?
So you submit for one project. It could have multiple locations if that's part of the scope, but you submit an application for one project, and that's what's awarded, and it's implemented as one project.
Okay, thank you. Not seeing any other public comment at this time.
Okay, thanks, Justin. We can go on to the next slide. This is actually about scope changes as well. So if anyone has any additional thoughts, they can always add it at the end of this slide. Next slide, please. Okay, so this would be in addition to the scope change section of the guidelines. It specifically would be kind of inserted at the end of the scope change section. And this is to clarify timing of scope changes, because this is an issue that we've seen recently with a couple of projects. So this paragraph would say, scope changes must be addressed as soon as they are identified and must be approved prior to receiving the construction allocation. The Commission will not consider retroactive scope changes that are requested after a construction allocation or after the project is constructed. Projects that are built with a modified scope without an approved scope change will not be eligible for cost reimbursement and must repay reimbursed ATP funds. So this is aligned with kind of the intent of scope changes anyway, but we really just wanted to make it clear that agencies really must, before they receive their construction allocation and before they construct a project, if they're not going to build what they say they're going to build, they have to come in for a scope change, and it may be a minor one or a major one. But we just really wanted that to be clear in the guidelines because it's an issue that has come up a few times. So we really want it to be clear, mainly because this could come up in an audit. So if there's a scope change that happens that we don't know about, which is possible, they build the project without coming for a scope change, and it gets caught in an audit, then that could be very bad for the agency in question. We're happy to take any comments on this, so I'll turn it back over to Justin.
Thank you, Beverly. Going to give it a few seconds here. Beverly, I'm not seeing any attendees indicating they wish to make public comment at this time.
Great, thanks, Justin. Give it a few more seconds because this is it for scope changes. So any final comments about scope changes or questions, you can feel free to chime in now. Okay, we will move on then. So next slide, please. So this next section is, this next language is a new section that we're adding to the guidelines. And this is really just to include information about what happens when a project is canceled. So, basically this kind of aligns with what already happens, but we really wanted to just put it in the guidelines so it's out there for everyone. So what we're proposing to add, I'll read it off the screen. It's pretty long, but I'll read it. So if an implementing agency elects to cancel a project, the agency must cease all invoicing and relinquish any remaining funds to the program. Project cancellations in the PAED, PSNE, or right-of-way phases require repayment of reimbursed ATP funds if the investment does not result in a physical improvement. Project cancellations directly related to compliance with other federal and or state law, such as NEPA or CEQA, do not require repayment. If an implementing agency feels repayment is not required for a project canceled in the PAED, PSNE, or right-of-way phase, the implementing agency must submit a written request to Caltrans. Caltrans will review the request and forward the request with a written recommendation to Commission staff for the Commission's consideration. So we can open this up for any questions or comments, and we also have our, again, Caltrans colleagues on the line in case there are any more technical questions about this.
Thank you, Beverly. We do have one written question that was submitted from Oscar Sai. They write, in general, what is the process for notifying CTC of a scope change?
So I would say you're supposed to work with Caltrans on scope changes. I believe they go through the district and then they go to headquarters and headquarters talks to us. So it's generally like you work with Caltrans and then we work with Caltrans. I will say though that if you're expecting a major scope change, we always do appreciate you or being informed about it kind of early on so we can work through it with the agency. And generally, I would say Caltrans headquarters is very, very good at coordinating this with us to make sure that we're informed. So they're good at communicating with us whenever this is happening. So I would just say agencies should make sure that they're communicating as well with Caltrans. I don't know if I missed anything on that. If anyone from Desiree or Sharina wants to chime in on more specifics of the scope change process, they can raise their hands if they want to.
I've really not seen anybody from Caltrans raising their hand at this time. Oscar Side did respond and say thank you. We did receive one additional written question from Peter Dehaan. They ask, what if a project misses a TUF deadline with no extension? Do previously expended funds then have to be repaid?
If anyone from Caltrans wants to chime in on this, so if a phase lapsed because they missed it, they either didn't request an extension or they missed a deadline for an existing time extension, they have to repay funds if it doesn't result in a physical improvement. I don't know, Desiree or Trina, if you want to chime in at all.
Beverly, we do have Trina. So,
Okay, perfect. Hey, Trina.
Trina, you're free to unmute yourself and comment.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, Beverly. Yeah, for this one, we will see what caused what caused the local agency cannot meet the TOF deadline. If that's their own fault, and yes, of course, you need to bear the consequence. But if because of, just like we said, because of, you cannot get the, because you finish your NEPA, for example, if you finish your NEPA and the NEPA said, oh, you cannot do this way, and you cancel this, and you cannot get the TOF, you cannot meet your timely use of fund, deadline, you do not need to repay back the funds. Yeah, for we do have several cases, they missed the deadline, but the local agency elect to use their own funds to cover this one. If in that regard, the funds already expend for the construction, for the pre-con phase, do not need to repay back because they already delivered. They use their own funds to cover the, the rest of the projects. Is that clear?
Thank you, Trina.
Beverly, we do have one more written question that was submitted during this time from Colin Clark. If a project sponsor is able to obtain a more streamlined CEQA or NEPA environmental review or waiver, such as SB 288, through a new law or administrative determination, can the funds be reallocated to a different phase of the project?
So are you, if you're asked, if they're asking if they have savings from a phase, whether it can be allocated to a future phase, is that what they're asking? I'm not sure. If they want to come off mute and ask, that also works.
Colin Clark, if you would like to come off mute, you're free to do so.
Yes, you're right, Beverly.
Okay, actually, I am going to have Desiree chime in now. If you can find Desiree.
Yes, Desiree.
Hi, Desiree Fox again, Caltrans. So there are some situations that are actually already written in the guidelines. If you've already allocated your funds, there is a way that you can move 20% of your, well, actually, I think with PS&E, within PA&ED, I'm sure you can move all of your PA&ED funds to PS&E. And both of the phases have to be allocated though. And those funds are still under the same timely use of funds guidelines that that those funds are, that the phase is kind of allotted to. So timely use of funds can be very complicated. The other thing that can happen is if there's a funding distribution request that you can also submit, but there are some really stringent rules with regard to that. So you can't move the funds if you are already in that current fiscal year or if that fiscal year has already passed. So it just depends on if you've already allocated the funds or not. And if you have, then there's just, there's still rules that apply to it regardless. So I would recommend looking at the guidelines currently, and you can see what's in there right now.
Thank you so much, Desiree.
Beverly, I'm not seeing any other public comment at this time.
All right, I'll give it a few seconds to see if anyone else chimes in. All right, we can move on to the next topic. Okay, so this is language that we are proposing to add to the project reporting section of the guidelines, and what we're proposing is in bold underline the additional language. So it reads, as part of the reporting process, the project applicant or partnering implementing agency must submit photographs depicting project progress and completion. Photographs of the completed project should be at least 300 dots per inch, or DPI. So the reason for this change is we really want to be able to highlight the benefits of this program, and it's something that we're getting a lot from lots of different policymakers and other stakeholders. They really want to see the benefits of this program. So something that makes it easier for us to highlight those benefits is if we have good pictures of the amazing projects that our agencies are implementing. So we're hoping to incorporate this into the project reporting process. So we would love to hear any questions or comments or concerns about this language now. So I will hand things back over to Justin.
Thank you, Beverly. Going to give it a few seconds. Not yet seeing any attendees indicating they wish to make public comment at this time. Oh, okay, we got Louis Zhao. Louis, you're free to unmute yourself and comment.
Thanks. Just real quick, I think if this is going to be made a requirement, there should also be the ability to waive it as well. I know that in the past we've had I think an issue with getting pictures like this, and it's kind of silly, but it's not for the ATP, but other projects and the SB1 programs, and we're literally taking pictures of like a light pole, and I think it's kind of silly to have photos of light pole, but sometimes there's things that are like 35 or 60 different light poles, and we need to take photos of all those. So I would recommend, if this is being required, there should also be at least either, I'm trying to think of a good way to put this, a frequency. So maybe every other report, but not every single report, or maybe looking at having some type of waiver in place, because I don't know how the agencies are structured, but certain agencies, they don't have the people filling out the reports as those are on the boots on the ground doing the actual work. That's just my suggestion. Thanks.
Thanks, Louis. Yeah, we can go back and look at frequency. As far as waiving it, I see what you mean about like taking a picture of a light pole, and that may be something that we could just handle, like Caltrans can handle with their reporting process, like some sort of waiver if it's something like that. We can talk about it. Hi, Lori.
So I think that we need photos at project completion. I mean, I don't know why we waive that, but if it's that, you know, that they're not going to want to do photos every report, then we could add language that they can, you know, if it's I don't know, something like if there's been significant progress or something like that. I'm afraid if we say, well, or you could not do this if you don't want to, then we won't ever get them.
Yeah, I think that would be easy to add in, like something about there being reports where there's been significant progress. And then definitely at completion, we would want photographs. And just like kind of thinking about what we're using these for, we use them for our annual report when we're highlighting projects. We use them for different presentations. They're used at commission meetings to highlight projects that have been recently completed. And we're just getting a lot of requests to like learn more about the benefits of the program. And I think this is a great way for people to actually see what the program is doing. Larry, do you want to add something?
Yeah, like Beverly said, we will get, just like an email randomly. Can you guys come up with 3 great projects in Orange County or whatever? And we need it in an hour. So, and then we're always kind of scrambling on finding this stuff. So it would be a lot better if we had it available, and then it would help us. Like one of the things that we're doing and currently doing is putting together a benefits report. So these kinds of pictures really are meaningful, particularly in the ATP. So I think it would be extremely helpful to the program as a whole if we could get some pictures. Now, this is not something where if there's an agency that for some reason just absolutely cannot take pictures for some reason, then they would just have to let us know and we would deal with that.
Thanks for that. I just want to make sure I get a lot of complaints about the reporting process already and the amount of reports that have to be submitted. And it's definitely something on my mind every time we get the SB1 reminders. You got to fill out a report. And I'm trying to make sure we don't burden the agencies too much. And having pictures I don't know how often we're doing it right now, but every reporting cycle seems like a lot, especially if it's like a hole in the ground or something at this point. So I like the substantially, or if there's a lot of progress done, it sounds fine to me. The completion photos, I think they're definitely something that the agency should be doing anyways. But it's just like if I'm putting a sign on a light pole, I don't want to be snapping a photo of it when it's literally just being bolted. So it's things like that. I just want to make sure we're not making agencies do more for very small, minor improvements. Thanks.
So Louis, we should talk about if you get more complaints on reporting or if we get more complaints on showing the benefits of the program.
Okay, Beverly, we do have a few more attendees who have sent in comments. Denise Montez comments, pictures will be difficult until construction has begun. Oscar Sai comments, photos are a great idea. Perhaps language to state that photos do not have to be of every discrete project element, but should convey a general idea of progress. From Graham Wadsworth, they ask, CalRecycle allows project managers to upload to a web-based grants management system database. Should we upload pictures in the same way?
I can see if anyone from Caltrans can chime in. They manage the reporting process, and I'm not sure if this is a function that they currently have for the reporting process or if this is something they would have to add. Or go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anybody from Caltrans at this time.
We can go back and talk to Caltrans and then clarify that at the next workshop next week.
Louis Zhao wanted to add that he forgot to mention it should be waived for pre-construction funded projects. We have one attendee with their hand raised at this time. We have Carl Anderson.
Hello, Carl Anderson with MTC. Everything's kind of been said already on this one, but I just wanted to express my support for everything that Lewis had already said about this. I think since we're already on a quarterly system for ATP project progress reports, I think this is just an unnecessary burden to add. And I think we should limit this just to the final delivery or the completion report. And yeah, just for the construction phases. Yeah, I can't imagine any legislature wants a picture of dirt and partially built sidewalk, but would rather see a completed project at the end.
Thanks,
Currently
Carl.
not seeing any, oh, excuse me, not seeing any other public comment at this time.
Great, thank you. So for this one, I will go back and talk to Caltrans about this, and then we'll also look at the comments that we received and refine this language, and we can share it with the group next week at the workshop. So I think at this point, I'm going to hand things back over to Lori for some wrap-up items. We have 10 minutes left.
Okay, so I totally forgot to talk about something when we were discussing the more the substantial policy items. That there is one area that is not finalized at all yet, and that's the quick build program. We're kind of behind on that, to be honest. We need to update those guidelines, and we've been trying to put together a small group to help us on that, and it's not coming together great yet. So those are not done. So we're going to try to get on that. It's an addendum to the overall guidelines, but once we get some language together, that does have to be presented to the larger group. So I want to make sure everyone understands that we're not going to just do that all behind closed doors and you won't know what's going on. We will come up with guidelines language for the quick build and then present them to the group. So that is the one area in the guidelines that's not pretty well wrapped up yet. It's not, I think we'll use the same funding target that we had last cycle, which I think was 7 million, but we need, the guidelines need to be better. They weren't, this is why we're doing a phase 2 of a pilot, because the applications we ended up getting were not quite what we had hoped for. So, and I think some of that was because the guidelines weren't clear enough. So they need work. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that is the one area, that the somewhat large area that is not ready to go yet. But we will make sure once we have something to present that we will bring it back to this group. Hopefully it'll be soon. Overall, if we've talked about a lot of things, but there is not a lot of changes to the guidelines this cycle, not of substance. So and probably the biggest change is that we'll be changing the project thresholds. So anyway, with that, I think that we can wrap up. Alika, did you have any action items for us? And then we can take final comments and talk about when the next workshop is. Yeah, so we do have a few actions.
Okay, so no worries. So I'll go through these action items, and if there's anything that I've missed, just like prior workshops, just feel free to reach out or let me know on here. So the first thing I have is we'll be looking into the language that's currently in the guidelines discussing the Caltrans project tours for projects 10 million and over. We'll be circling back with Victoria and the other MPOs regarding project thresholds in the MPO component. We'll be talking to our management about allowing changes to programming years to projects that need segmenting. We'll be talking with Caltrans about project segmenting requests after an approved allocation. And then also adding language to project reporting, to the project reporting section regarding pictures of projects. And we'll also be touching base with Caltrans regarding uploading those photos. And I know someone had mentioned the web-based grants management system database. So we'll be following up on that as well. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Alika. So we're going to go to Justin, see if we have any final comments and questions, and then just a reminder on the next workshop. So Justin.
Thank you, Lori. We did receive one written question from Guadalupe Cortez. They ask, question relating to project types. Does a bike detection project qualify as a strong project?
Unfortunately, I don't know what that means. So either the person can come off mute or they can send either me, Beverly, or Alika an email, and we can get back to the person with specific, they can ask that specific question to us about a project.
Not seeing any elaboration. Not seeing any additional comment.
Okay, Alika, when is our next workshop?
Right. The next workshop is January 19th, and I believe it's at 9:30. I would like to double check that. Sorry.
So while Alika's doing that, I just want to remind everyone that we will be presenting the draft guidelines at the January commission meeting. So you'll see that in the meeting materials for the January commission meeting, and then we're adopting in March. I think at the next workshop, we'll finish up with the, we'll return to the few action items that we had from this workshop, and then continue on with the language and the administrative changes that we started today. And then that will be all on the guidelines. So after the guidelines are pretty much wrapped up, then we will move on to talk about the application and the scoring rubrics. And just because we're not having workshops anymore in the guidelines, if you really have something that you want to comment on, you can always send us a comment or make a comment at a commission meeting. So I will check in lastly with Justin. Okay, I think that's it. So thank you, everybody. I'm really glad. I didn't think we'd get through as much as we did today. So thank you so much to everyone for attending and all of your input. And we'll see you soon. Bye.